Well, this is a fine mess for the Ravens. What's going on, everybody? Hope you guys are enjoying your day. So, Ravens flock. Today's been kind of chaotic. It's wild to see this coming out today, man. I just got back and we're already getting even more chaotic news. It just hasn't been a good time for the Ravens, and based on what happened today, it has not been a good look for the Ravens at all. It seems like they have done a really poor job in handling things, and the fact that they've been incompetent to handle these type of situations makes them look bad as a franchise, and their reputation that they've been holding on to is looking bad right now. So if you guys don't know what's been going on, which I'm pretty sure everyone does, the Ravens right now are kind of just under fire because of how they've kind of handled things. Obviously, we all know about the Lamar Jackson contract situation. The media has been killing the Ravens for not getting that done, but now a new element's kind of been thrown into the aspect. So Rashad Bateman kind of spoke up today in regards to a comment Eric DeCosta made, in which he was speaking about the offense and the lack of production from the passing game and the lack of production from the receiving game. And Eric DeCosta, for the most part, spoke up about how we haven't exactly had a lot of production from the receiving core, and how the receiving talent that we've had on this team hasn't been the best. So he kind of speaks up on that. But he does speak up on it, but apparently that was enough for Rashad Bateman to speak out on. So when he spoke up on it, it seemed, or at least the way it was taken by many people, was that he was kind of blaming the receivers for the failures of the offense, as opposed to him just, pointing out his own mistakes as to not being able to bring enough talent. It basically came off like, we have been trying. We understand that the passing game hasn't been where it needs to be. We especially understand that the receiving talent hasn't been where it needs to be. I understand that, but it's not like we haven't been trying. We've been drafting a lot of guys and trying to bring them in, but it just hasn't worked out. The receiving talent isn't where it needs to be, and that's something I want to improve on. It just hasn't been as talented as we would want it to be. So that was one of the main things he was trying to push towards that. Well, Rashad Bateman got a hold of that, and he had quite the few amount of things to say. He basically he takes a shot at Greg Roman and Steve Saunders for the incompetence those two had during their time here. And he basically expresses to Eric DeCosta that he needs to stop blaming the players and look at the incompetence that he and John Harbaugh allowed to happen on their watch. It wasn't him taking a shot at Eric DeCosta, it was taking a shot at Greg Roman and Steve Saunders. Obviously, he's not going to name those two. He's not just doing that, but he does respond by saying that instead of blaming the receiving talent and number 8 for the lack of production in the passing game and the offense being the way it is, how about you take a look at the incompetence you had here that was not utilizing the players and the talent you had and wasn't working to the strengths of your players. How about you do that instead? How about you, work towards getting us in the right position so that we can succeed? And how about you get us a guy that can help keep us healthy for the most part, and a guy that can actually take care of us for the most part, that can actually help us get to where we want to get to. Instead of blaming us, the players, why don't you take a look at the staff and see what's happening there? So he just went at it, man. He really went at it. He was taking a shot at Greg Roman and Steve Saunders, and he was trying to point out to Eric DeCosta that he should not be pointing the finger at the talent that's been here. Instead, point the finger at the two coaches you allowed here to be incompetent during their time here, and the fact that you didn't bat an eye while they were ruining the team low-key is it's a bad appearance on you, and it's a bad appearance on John. He doesn't mention John Harbaugh in this, and it's not like he's taking a direct shot at Eric DeCosta, but he is pointing out that it's not the players' fault that this wasn't able to work out, and it wasn't the players' fault that we weren't able to stay healthy. Look at the guys that were doing a poor job that they were hired to do, in Greg Roman and Steve Saunders. Look at how they were not able to put us in the position to stay healthy and succeed, and how about you go from there and work towards improving that. That was one of the aspects he was speaking on, especially because he got tired, man. He's like, I'm tired of y'all capping on us and blaming the players for all the issues. I'm tired of you blaming us, and I'm tired of you blaming number 8 for all the issues. So he went at it, man. He had like multiple tweets regarding it. Now, of course, he did later on apologize for these tweets and went on to delete them, which Again, I'm not surprised. That phone call he got must have been hella quick. He posted that got viral. Of course, multiple platforms started to talk about this, and yeah, he got a phone call real quick. He definitely got that phone call from DaCosta, or even Bushati. Maybe Bushati was the one that called him and said, but you can't be doing that. We cannot have this type of drama. We're trying to get this situation done with Lamar Jackson. You cannot have our players doing this. So I don't know if it was Bushati. I don't know if it was Harbaugh. I don't know if it was DaCosta. Somebody phoned Rashad Bateman and told him to take that tweet down. So that got handled. But, you know, when it comes to this situation, what feels like was the catalyst that kind of started this, that kind of fueled the fire to let this happen, because Rashad Bateman wasn't the only person to speak out. There were multiple people, current and previous Ravens, that really spoke out about this, specifically towards Steve Saunders. So what kind of started this out, and we're going to get into some of those people that said that. What started this out was a report that kind of came out. So see, here's what happened. The NFLPA decided to give each and every team a report card. So what they did is they reached out to the players and had them grade every specific aspect of what the franchise is doing, you know, in terms of food and nutrition, in terms of the training plan, the strength and conditioning, aspects like that. So they had all these players from all 32 teams sit back and grade their facility and grade their teams on these aspects. And when that was done, they sent out the report cards, and we got to see the good and the bad with every franchise. And when it comes to the Ravens, in terms of totality and where they rank based on their total grade, the Ravens are ranked about 17th in the league. So they're at the bottom half. Think about this. This team has had the reputation of being one of the best ran organizations in football. They spent the better part of the first 15 to 20 years of the existence of this franchise building up that reputation, a reputation that was around the area of the New England Patriots. That's how good they had been those first 20 years in terms of building up that reputation. So they were always seen as one of the best ran franchises, one of the most trustworthy franchises, one of the most greatly run franchises. There wasn't a lot of drama you would hear come out of Baltimore. There was never issues that we were dealing with. The Ravens have never been a team that's been constantly in the media because you're never hearing about multiple dramatic actions. Prior to what's happened with this Lamar Jackson situation, the only time you could honestly remember the Ravens being in the media is two other altercations. The Ray Rice situation, and of course early on with the Ray Lewis situation. Past that, there's not a lot of times where the Ravens have been constantly discussed in the media in terms of what they're doing or how they're handling a player. That's the type of reputation they've built up. They rarely have moments like that. Yet this situation with Lamar has been the topic of discussion on damn near every sports media platform. And it's put the Ravens at the top, damn near at the top of the talking poll. So it hasn't been a good look for them. But now you got these grades coming out, and the grades reveal a lot, because when it came to one specific aspect that they were graded on, the Ravens were ranked dead last. They had the worst grade out of any team in the league. They were ranked 32 of 32, the last place. That aspect was strength and conditioning. And the grade the players gave for strength and conditioning is an F-. An F- for the strength and conditioning? Well, if the players feel that strongly, it makes sense and it correlates with what's been happening. Because over the last 3 years since the 2020 season, if you've taken a look at how things have been handled and how things have gone for the Ravens, they have been one of the most injured teams in football. So you have all these injuries, guys that are getting injured, coming back and re-injuring themselves. Obviously, we saw the Ronnie Stanley situation, how he got pushed back. He got pushed back till this previous season, because they rushed him back early on during the 2021 season, that week 1 game where they made him play against the Raiders in Las Vegas. And we saw how that went. We saw the whole situation with J.K. Dobbins. He ended up coming on the field, and he had to go back. We saw how the Rashad Bateman and the Devin Duvernay situation was handled, in which they were dealing with foot injuries or dealing with some sort of injury, and they were just playing through it, and it wasn't being managed well. Obviously, Derek Wolfe, he's spoken about his time here and how the strength and conditioning coach was doing a terrible job. So this is something that we've kind of been discussing over the last couple years, and we're seeing how poorly it's been over the last several years. Yet this guy hadn't been handled until now. And honestly, the teams knew. The teams knew that this was going to come out. I'm sure they were alerted and aware that their players graded them and that these grades were going to come out because the NFLPA was serious with this. So I'm sure the Ravens were notified that these grades were going to come out. They probably saw the grades beforehand. So if that is the case, one can make the argument the only reason Steve Saunders is no longer with the team is because the Ravens saw the grades the players gave them and knew they were going to get backlash, so they chose to move off of him. The Ravens' incompetence is starting to show. We've seen how this situation has been handled with Greg Roman. Several players, current and former, have taken shots at Greg Roman. They've spoken up on Greg Roman. They've shown their frustrations, which is why last year was the melting point for every fan. They wanted this man gone yesterday, and the Ravens knew at some point they had to get rid of this guy because of how toxic it became. They let that happen. Greg Roman should have been gone after the 2020 season, but they let him stay around for another 2 years. The same could be said for Steve Saunders. That man should have been gone after the 2020 season, but they let him stick around. And both of these guys have done so much damage to the Ravens' reputation. It's showcasing. You got former players speaking up about how poorly Steve Saunders was handling situations and how these guys were kind of being rushed back and their injuries weren't handled well. And at times they were getting accused of being lazy because they're not trying to re-injure themselves and they're not giving it their all at that time because, again, they're dealing with an injury. They're not trying to force it. They're not trying to go out there and strain themselves to re-injure that injury. But Steve Saunders was doing such a poor job. He wasn't managing that well. And in some cases, they were kind of being rushed back a little bit, especially during the 2021 season, heading into the 2022 season. It was not a good look. It was not a good look. You got Judon that didn't even waste time with this. He directly said, I told them to fire him. So this is just the aspect you're getting. You're getting Hollywood Brown, who was absolutely in 100% agreement with how Rashad Bateman was speaking out in terms of Greg Roman and Steve Saunders. He was in complete agreement with that. And we all knew that's one of the main reasons why Hollywood Brown asked for that trade. He no longer wanted to be in that system that was ran by Greg Roman, saw that the Ravens didn't look like they didn't have any sort of plan or any sort of desire to move on from Greg Roman at that point, and he chose to leave and he chose to want to be traded, and he got traded to a different team. So he was in agreement with what Rashad Bateman said. Several other former players, former Ravens, were in agreement to what he was saying in terms of how the team was kind of just like poorly managing things, especially when it came to Steve Saunders and Greg Roman. So yeah, this is just not a good look. This is just not a good look at all. Of course, Rashad Bateman has deleted the tweet, so it is what it is. But the fact that he said it, and I don't blame him for saying it, I'm glad he did. I love when players are honest about how things are being handled within this facility. The fact that he was that vocal with it shows how poorly Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh have handled this situation over the last couple years. To the fact that it got to this point with both Greg Roman and Steve Saunders, that is an indictment on both Harbaugh and DeCosta. And of course, you gotta look at the talent in the receiving core, and it's not the best. But you also haven't put in that room specifically. When it comes to defense, that's a different aspect. But you have not put that wide receiver room in the position to win. You have not. With Greg Roman's system, they haven't been able to thrive. And it has led to several players departing, and it's led to a lot of disappointing seasons, or at least disappointing ends to the season. So it just hasn't been a good look. Greg Roman was a problem. Obviously we knew. Steve Saunders was a problem. Obviously we knew. And they were here for 2 extra years. They should have been gone after the 2020 season, but they still stuck around, and the Ravens chose to be incompetent, ignore what was happening around them, and not address it. So they stayed here for an extra 2 years, and it has caused a lot of damage. Who knows what happens with Derek Wolfe? Maybe he's still playing for the Ravens if it wasn't for those Steve Saunders situations. There's several players that have gotten injured over these last couple years that have dealt with these injuries and have re-injured themselves, or they've dealt with the injuries and it could have been avoided if they were doing a different sort of training aspect. So you got to look at the incompetence that was shown here by Steve Saunders. You got to look at the incompetence by Greg Roman in his passing game and how the offense was ran. And then you got to look at Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh and say, how the hell did you let this happen? It's one thing if the fans are saying this, but players are coming out and saying it about the organization, and you're being graded, and your grade is that poor. You're in the bottom half of the league. You're supposed to be a storied franchise, and you're in the bottom half of the league in terms of grade ranking? Are you serious? You're getting an F- on strength and conditioning? Oh yeah, that's just not a good look for the Ravens. It's not. I don't know what happens from here, but yeah, this is just not a good look. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna end it here. I'm kind of just shocked that it got to this point, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. And yeah, I mean, Greg Roman's gone, Steve Saunders is gone. I don't know if either one of these decisions are made if it's not for this report card coming out. I have no clue, but the Ravens' incompetence has been showing. It's been showcasing itself to everybody, and the media continues to be on their case because of how poorly they've handled Lamar Jackson's situation, and they're going to continue to ramp it up based on how these report cards have come out and how now you've had Rashad Bateman speak out and, you know, defend Lamar Jackson, defend the players from what Eric DeCosta was saying in regards to how the offense is and then how the team has kind of performed. It is what it is. It's not a good look for the Ravens. It feels like at this point their reputation has taken a serious hit, which it's not a good look. But at the end of the day, I'm glad this is happening because we've spoken on this. The Ravens have been coasting. They have been coasting, and they've been utilizing the hell out of that reputation in order to get away with a lot of the incompetence they've been showcasing themselves over the last several years. They're utilizing that reputation that they built up over the last 15 to 20 years to kind of get away with a lot of things that have been poor. They haven't handled the receiving situation well. Clearly, they sat back and didn't handle the strength and conditioning coach situation when he was doing a poor job. They sat back and let Greg Roman stay here despite the fact that there were several individuals, former and current, that were voicing their frustrations. They didn't listen when people were speaking out on this, and they just ignored everything until things got to its melting point. So yeah, they've handled this poorly, but I just don't know what's gonna happen moving forward. Obviously those two guys are gone, but I just don't know. They gotta look to turn this around because their reputation has taken a huge hit. It's one thing if when it comes to a Lamar Jackson situation, the contract one, people can somewhat let that slide, but to have former and current players come out and bash you guys for how you guys have handled the situation, how your staff has performed, that's not a good look. That's not a good look, especially since fans have wanted those two guys gone for years now, and you chose to ignore that, and the signs were there, and you guys were not handling it, so you were being incompetent for years. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. I appreciate you guys stopping by, and with that being said, that is all I've got, and I'm out of here, man. Peace!